Thanks so much for joining us, Mike Seaman. Mike, for those that aren't aware of who you are, just to let people know that you're the CEO for the National Running Show. Can you tell us a little bit about your running story?
Yeah, I love running, and it's now my job as well as my hobby. But I took it up probably in my late 20s. I used to play a lot of team sports, like loved football. I was terrible at it, but I loved it, and I play it all the time if I could. Um, but like my job got busier, I was always in events and I was away a lot and working weird hours, and you just couldn't commit to being in a certain place at a certain time. And I love food and I love beer, and I was just getting rounder and rounder as time went on. And I kind of just did running because it was a way of easily getting out and keeping myself a little bit more in shape than I was, losing maybe one of the chins. And then I started to do races. And I did a 5K and a 10K, and I had a few mates who were doing it as well. They were all sort of in our 20s, we're all going through the same thing. We all had that middle-age spread starting to happen, and we all just wanted to do something to keep ourselves sort of physically in shape. And then it actually became quite good for me mentally. I kind of found it was quite a good, if you have a really stressful job, it's kind of quite good to have a place to release that. So then I did my first marathon with some of those boys, and we went to Paris. I did Paris, and then did a few more marathons, and it became like a thing. I'd always try and do a challenge every year, to try and raise money for charity, because it's nice to do something good, right? And people got less willing to sponsor. At first, you do a half marathon and people would sponsor you. And then if you did another one, they'd be like, well, you've done one of those. So they want to see you push further if you're going to raise more money. So it was like do a marathon, then it was do a marathon, did one dressed as a Lucozade bottle, one dressed as an elephant. Then it was do multi-marathons. So I did 7 marathons in 7 days. Then I did like ultra marathons. I did a 50, my first 50 with the North Downs Way Centurion one, which was brutal. And then it just got, I've been up and I've even I've done 300 milers now. So, which to me is nuts, because if I look back at myself when I was in my 20s, the thought of running a 10K was just horrific. And to think that I've run 100 miles in one go just feels weird.
How do you think, in terms of the races that you've done and can now compare, because you've done such a range of them, how do you feel, ultra marathons are different? What do you think, what do you think the beautiful things are about ultra marathons?
But the best thing about ultra marathons is the food. It's basically it's a long picnic. What's not to like? The bit I like about ultras, if I'm being, I love the community vibe. I think it's a lot less. The competitive end is a lot less competitive, if that makes sense. It's kind of everyone's kind of there together. There's a real sort of community spirit. The aid stations where it's all runners who are on the aid stations who are helping you out, and it's just it just feels like you're all in it together, even the people that are there as the support crew. And I think it's much more of a like I find with a marathon or a 10K, you kind of flog yourself when you're gunning, and it's physically it feels great. And with an ultra, certainly if you do it the way I do, it's sort of it takes a lot longer. You're less like threshold pace, and you're kind of able to stop and enjoy the view. I mean, if I was running a marathon, I wouldn't want to stop and take a picture in front of a beautiful scenery, some beautiful scenery. Whereas if I'm running an ultra, you're an idiot if you don't, because you see these amazing places and these amazing things, and you've got the time to kind of enjoy it a bit more.
Mm.
So for me, my heart is in ultras now, and I think that's where I enjoy it. I love that bit where you get to the point where you know you should stop, your body's screaming at you to stop, and you're about 25 miles from home or whatever it is, and you find a way to keep going. And I kind of think it's just like unlocking that ability to do more. I just love that. That's the real buzz for me.
The trails that it takes you to as well, like you say, the North Downs Way. It's a lovely trail, isn't it? It's really nice. Some really kind of lovely places that it takes you to, doesn't it?
Well, our office is in Guildford, which is on the North Downs Way
Yeah,
pretty much.
yes, yeah.
And I live about 13 miles down the North Downs way from the office. That's not a coincidence. The office was put here for a reason. And but you're right. I would never have ever found that trail route just by doing the sort of training that I'd previously done, which was, when I was training for marathons, I just used to run on roads. And I look back and I go, oh, I wasted so many hours of running, not being out in the great outdoors and seeing the countryside. I missed so much cool stuff. So even the training for ultras, you're in nature, and it's quite good for your
Yeah.
soul.
Yeah, it's nice to push that pause button that we all need from time to time, isn't it? And like you say, when you're in a marathon and you're aiming for 3 hours or 3:30 or 4 hours or 5 hours, whatever it be, you're so focused on the time. Whereas in an ultra marathon, you might be out there for 24 hours or for longer than that, might you? So it's a completely different ball game, isn't it?
Someone once said to me, like when you finish a marathon, the first thing everybody asks you is what time did you do? Whereas when you finish an ultra, they go, how far? And it's like, I wouldn't
What?
drive that.
Why did you do
Yeah,
that?
yeah. And I think it's less external pressure as well. So I think people have got a perception of a marathon that a time is somehow equated to the value of what you did. Whereas obviously the people who are out there the longest, they're out there the longest, they're working the hardest. So I'm not sure I buy into it, but there is this external pressure around anything under an ultra. Whereas as soon as you say you ran 40, 50 miles or 100 miles, people just think you're nuts.
Yeah.
And you are in a very small club of people who probably are nuts, but in a good way.
Yeah, absolutely. And Centurion is such a good, events organization, aren't they? They're really up there, as one of the best, if not the best. In terms of the what kind of inspires you to take on ultra marathons? What kind of why an ultra marathon? Is it the unknown? Why?
Well, when it started, it was trying to do something different that would raise more money, because it was just that objective. I just wanted to raise some money for charity. And I read a book by Dean Karnazes called Ultramarathon Man. And I think most people have read this book who are in ultra running, and he's responsible for ruining a lot of people's lives in terms of getting them to take up ultra running. And I just read it and I just thought the stuff he was doing sounded insane. The races through the deserts, the sort of running for 30 miles as a training run, ordering a pizza ahead and picking it up. And it just sounded
Yeah,
nuts.
at some kind of odd junction and things like that, wasn't it?
Yeah. And it's just,
Taking and running, people running a relay, and he's running the full length himself.
yeah, and you just go, wow, like this guy's, and I thought he was a superhero who was untouchable, who I would never be anything like. But it sort of inspired me a little bit to think, well, maybe I could go a bit further, maybe I could do a bit more. As I say, I did that first 50, and I wasn't dead afterwards. I was tired, and I ate for about a month. But I actually sort of opened up. Thought, oh well, what else can I do? And then so I did a few just sort of for fun, and I kind of got addicted to the community. And then you make friends with people, and you make friends, and those friends are then tell you go and do this and go do that, and you just get suckered in, don't you? And you always want something new and different. And some of the best experiences I've had in my life are out on the trails with doing ultras, just because that raw feeling of pushing through the pain barrier is just epic.
Yeah, yeah, 100%, 100%. And recently you've done the Daytona 100. Can you tell us a little bit about why the Daytona 100 and whereabouts it was?
Yeah, so it's in Florida, and it was just before Christmas. And I'm through the running show, which is, I'm so lucky to have been able to make my hobby my job. But I made friends with Susie Chan, who's like a really elite, good ultra runner. She's now a Peloton instructor. She's done like the Marathon des Sables 4 times. She's
Yeah,
nuts and an incredibly good runner. And she lives not far from me, and we started running together. And the problem when you have friends like that is they make everything sound so easy. And they say, oh yeah, you could do that. And because they can do it and they assume that you're at their level. I'm not at her level. She's actually a really good runner. But she's done the Daytona 100 before.
Right.
And there's a new race director who's taken it over, a guy called Bob Becker, who's quite renowned. And it was just like, well, let's go over and do it and support them. And then Chris Cosman was going to be there, who's the race director for Badwater, who I was just like, wow, these are cool people. I want to go get involved in this. And I I signed up for it, not really, not really thinking about it. And then I was like, oh, I've got to do 100 miles, and then I'm going to Florida, and I was like, how lucky am I to get to fly to another country and run a race like that? I mean, it's the only time I've ever traveled that sort of distance to run a race, and then to run 100 miler, which would have been my third ever finish if I finished it, which luckily I did. But it was just like, wow, this is nuts. But then I had to take the training quite seriously. So I did. So I started with London Marathon. I did that, and then I did the Glasgow to Edinburgh Ultra, which was brilliant training for it because that's like 56, I think, 55, 56, that one. And they were, that sort of got me in shape, and then I just wriggled over and went out there. But the one thing you can't train for in the UK in the autumn/winter is heat. And as you can tell from my pasty complexion, hot weather and me are not great friends. And it was really hot. It was really hot. So I did struggle a bit with that, but we got it done. We made it through. There's a group of us that flew out. There was myself and Susie did the 100. Our friend Emma ran the 50, and then Susie's husband Sean crewed her, and then a guy called John Cosgrove, who's a friend of ours who we run with, again, much better runner than me. He came and crewed me, and because you have to have somebody with you if you're a 100-mile runner. They do have aid stations, but in America they also, you have to have a crew member. It was just a mega experience. It's so different. I didn't think ultras over there would be different to over here, but they are. And it's hard to explain why, but it was just the whole thing was just felt like a really new experience.
The terrain that you were running for the Daytona 100, was it pathway?
Yeah, so essentially you run from Jacksonville Beach down to Daytona Beach, which is pretty much a straight line for 100 miles alongside the sea, and the terrain is probably 95% pavement and path, and pretty flat, which I'm not used to. I mean, I don't really run much on roads, and I like the hills in an ultra because it sort of gives you a bit of time for your walk breaks and all of that. And I was really interesting, but it had its advantages are that it's flat and fast, right? So you can get some good speed up if you can train for it properly. I probably should have done more training on that type of surface, and my feet struggled, which I've never had before. Like I actually got like quite a lot of blisters and stuff on my feet from doing it, which I think is possibly the heat and possibly just not being used to that type of terrain. But it was, I mean, again, it's a new and different challenge. I mean, you're running across these bridges over these sort of swamps in, as the sun's going down in Florida, and you're just like, what? This is cool. And I mean, it's 100 miles in a straight line. There's not much signage, because you don't need much signage because you just follow the road. But there's also maybe 150 people started the race, so you get spread out pretty quick. So there'll be times when you'll be like 3-4 hours on your own in the night in Florida, running along by the side of a road, and I'm like, it's a bit surreal. But it was a good race. It was a really good race. I mean, I think probably I learned a lot about how to manage the heat. So I failed at the South Downs 100 last year, and sorry, the year before last. It was a really hot day in the UK, and I really struggled, and I'm getting dizzy and hallucinating, and I had to pull out. And actually, this is one of the things that Susie and Sean and John were really good at making sure is that ice Like, I've never really used ice like this before, but putting ice in my hat and getting a buff with ice on and ice on your wrists, and actually just managing the temperature of my core temperature better made a huge difference.
Yeah.
I had some fantastic tan lines, which you may have seen on my Instagram. I put factor 30 on, like slathered it on, and I still got sunburn. I mean, it was pretty warm, but I mean, you can't. I was in Florida a couple of weeks before Christmas with my mates, having a great time. So there's not an ounce to complain from me on it.
Like you say, the one of the things about ultramarathons is that you're constantly learning because there's that many different types of races these days. There's those that give you the main challenge might be the road and also the heat, but sometimes it's the mountains, sometimes it's it's and getting those kind of factors on your side. It might be just by using the ice, it increases, gives you that extra percentage. And that's really, part and parcel of it, isn't it?
Yeah, and I've never done that before. I'd never tried ice in my hat in training or anything like that. Or, Susie had a buff that she gave me that she sort of put ice in and then put around the back of my neck. And I was like, oh, this is amazing. And it's just weird the things you get. And the food situation, I felt like I managed my food probably for the first time in an ultra really, really well.
Yeah.
Like I didn't really use any sugar. I ate well throughout. I mean, I don't think I followed what a nutritionist would say was the ideal diet. At one point, I think it was about 3 a.m, I had a craving for a burger, and I rang ahead to John and I was like, mate, I need a burger. And he gave me this burger, and it was honestly the greatest piece of food I think I've ever had in my entire life. It tasted incredible. But this thing was like a $3 microwave burger that he bought from a service station. And at that point, it worked. I don't know why. I can't explain it, but it just
Mm.
did. But I ate did a lot of fruit, a lot of cheese. I found cheese really like works. I tried that at your race, actually. That was the first thing that got me into sort of cheese as I was going around. That was definitely a good shout. Lots of crisps and nuts and things like that. But and sort of having proper meals at proper meal times. I think that I know nutrition is really personal, but for me that seemed to work. And I feel like finally, after about 5 or 6 years of doing ultras, I think I've got a nutrition strategy that works for me.
That's amazing. That's amazing because it's just trial and error, isn't it? It just takes a
Yeah.
long time and the conditions will have a big say in that as well, won't it? Well, how did it feel crossing the finish line of all of these races that you've taken part in, let's say Daytona 100? How did it feel?
The Daytona was so they have a rule for the Daytona 100 that you have to cross the line with your crew, which I loved. So me and John crossed the line together, and Susie was obviously a bit ahead of me. She thinks she finished about an hour before me, and but she was still there, so waiting. And then Chris was there from Badwater, and it was just I don't know. It just felt really good, like all your mates being around, and it's that big emotional release when you cross the line, and it's difficult to describe to people who haven't done this kind of thing. But it's the same when I crossed the line on my first marathon. You almost want to cry. It's quite emotional because you've been wrung out, and then you get there and you go, oh man, I didn't quit. I got to the end, and it's a wicked rush for about 2 seconds before you go, right, where's the food?
And I want to sit down. I need to sit down or fall down.
No,
Yeah.
it's just where's the food. For me. It's always where's the food.
Yeah, you've got more miles in those legs yet, Mike, haven't you? Yeah, well, that's brilliant. Fantastic. Thanks so much for sharing that side of things. The National Running Show is upcoming now. Fantastic. Well done to yourself and all the team and everybody that's put it together over the years and worked hard and on that side of things. Who can we expect from to see on the speaker side of things this year?
Oh, it's mega. The running show is like to me, it's the most personal event because obviously it's what we started with as a company. But this year, I'll pick out the ultra runners because they're the good. So Dean Conazes will be there. Ultra Marathon Man, the book I mentioned. Gary Robbins is there. Sally McRae, who's often known as the Yellow Runner. So Gary Robbins is the guy from the Barkley Marathon documentary where he just almost got on the last loop. Damien Hall, and then we've also got people like Dina Asher Smith, Ailish McColgan, Colin Jackson, Chris Akabusi, Jenny Faulkner, Anna Hardy. So loads of people. This is probably our best ever speaker lineup. I think we've got Steve Cram. How can you miss Steve Cram off? It's like, so we have got like a room full of awesome runners. And what I love about them is, and you've been to the show, they all stick around and they're all available to have your photo with them, have a chat. And as you know, like most of these runners, even if they're like super elite, I mean, Sally McRae must be one of the best ultra runners in the world right now. And she's the nicest person you could ever meet. And she just wants to chat to everybody. And I've got so many people going, do you need to help, Sally, like walk around the show, carry her bags? And all that. I was like, no, I think she's fine. But yeah, so it's a pretty exciting lineup. Then we have a dedicated ultra stage, which we do with the guys at Bad Boy Running. So there's ultra content and trail content throughout. And then we've got the other big stage, which is like the inspiration and sort of advice type stage. Then we've got a recovery zone, we've got a Pilates zone, got a CPR workshop, which we've started adding into the shows now. I think that's kind of an important topic. It's not something to be scared of if you don't know how to do it. Worth stopping by just because it's one of those things you don't know you need until you need it. And so yes,
it's scary, and the more people that you communicate that with, and you're in a fantastic position where you can do that, and that's really cool that you're putting that in there.
I think look, one of the things we've got to do is like use the show to support the community. That was always like my vision. I didn't think we were going to make any money when we started this, and then it turned into an actual thing, and it's actually turned into a business, and we've got people who work here now. Well, I just started this because I love it. So what we set when we set up the companies, we said, look, we've got to give money back. We've got to support things that matter. So sustainability, diversity, equity, inclusion, things like CPR. We've got like a grant scheme now. So we do 2 grants, an elite sport grant, where we help fund people because it's elite athletes get very little funding in the running market, something that I find really troublesome. There's the very, very top guys get enough money, but you've got Olympians that can't afford to eat. So we do an elite sport grant there, and we've also got a community grant. So if you use running in the local area as a force for good, like we've sponsored some bloggers and some community run groups that help people with mental health issues, then we can give you a little bit of cash for that. It's not millions because we don't have millions, but we give what we can. And I think it's important to give something back.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you say, it all really adds to the show. Something new and unique. The National Running Show, it's the various speakers are on at different times, aren't they? You give a timetable, you publicize it so that people can choose the Saturday or the Sunday, or they can choose when to be at certain points, can't they? And they're going to learn so much from it as well, aren't they? There's such a variety that's going on.
Well, that was it. So we said that if you look on nationalrunningshow.com, there's sort of a listing of all the agenda and all of the different speaker timings and when it starts. The idea was always inspiration, kit, tech, nutrition advice, races. Those were like our 6 key pillars. So the inspiration of like people who make you want to get off, like Dean Conaz's was to me, who made me want to go and try something different and new. The kit, so we have all the major brands pretty much there this year. So 2 times you Adidas, Asics, Brooks, Garmin, iPro, Mizuno, Solomon, Up and Running, Scott, Harrier. We've got some really strong brands there. So that's kind of the kit and the tech side. Nutrition's massive. There's too many companies there doing nutrition to name, but try them all. As somebody who really struggled with nutrition for a long time, I think it's just trial and error, exactly as you said earlier. And you don't really get that opportunity to try lots of different things elsewhere. So that's what I think is good about it. And then, the advice side of things. So there are like specific expert sessions where you can talk to physios or you can listen to run coaches. And I think that, again, is quite important because a lot of that is often one-way communication. You often get coaches dispensing advice, but it's very personalized, and actually having the opportunity to go back and forwards and ask about specific things, I think is really valuable. And I'd say if you don't know the answer to something, or if something doesn't make sense, ask the dumb question, because I guarantee you there's other people in the room who don't know it
Yeah,
either.
100%, 100%.
So there's a bit of that. And then the races, I mean, you know about the races side. I mean, we've got ultra races out there which are that you can discover and find. You know, I think I booked into one of your races at our show.
Yeah,
It
you
was
did.
yeah.
Yeah. I
So
think Ian suckered you into that one.
yeah, so we had so obviously on the ultra side, you've got GB Ultras. We also have Ultra X there, and I think there'll be a few others in there as well. I think, you know, there's also a race village area within the show where you can sort of go and find other distances if you want to. I think that's really important for me. Is like when I set up the running show, I wanted it to be like the coolest running shop that you could ever get, with all of the stuff that you normally get in a running shop, and then all of the stuff that you would want in there but is never in a running shop, including like all your celeb mates and all of these races. Because races are never, you go to a running shop, you don't find a race there,
No.
because why would they? But actually, it's all in the running show, and that's what I think is cool
It's
about it.
amazing. It really is amazing. And it's always a pleasure to be a part, you know. So thanks so much for putting it together. Like I say, you guys have done an amazing job over the years now. So if people wanted to book a ticket for the National Running Show, whereabouts do they go to?
Yeah, so if they head to the website nationalrunningshow.com, what I will do is I'll also, because it's you, we'll give you a code for anybody who watches this. Let's call it Ultra. And I'll make that a free code. I better go and talk to Hannah and make sure she sets that up now, because just
Yeah,
came up
no,
with
that's
that.
brilliant. Thanks so much for that. I really appreciate it. So they'll head onto their website, they'll put the code in, and they'll look at booking some tickets now.
Yeah, perfect.
Brilliant. And then leading on to the next thing really is the other shows that you've got. Just a quick mention. What other shows have you got coming up this year?
Yeah, so we started with the running show because that was my passion, and then as time's gone on, we've gone, well, actually, I just want to run shows for people to get active outside. So in March we have an outdoor expo. So that's basically running, walking, climbing, cooking, camping. You know, we've got Ben Fogle is and Ray Mears and people like that speaking at that one. So that's a really cool show. We did stand-up paddleboarding on the lake outside and all of that stuff too. We've got the National Equine Show, also in March. That's a new launch for us, and that's a retail show for people who love horses. So our premise with that is there's very few tack shops left, a bit like how specialist running shops, you know, they're harder to find these days. So actually, we wanted to create the biggest, coolest tack shop you could get. So you've got Charlotte
Bring it all
Desjardins,
together.
yeah, Carl Hester's there. So that's a really good show for us. Then we have our National Snow Show, which takes place. We've got one at the NEC and one at the XL. So basically anything to do with snow sports in that one. We have the National Cycle Show at the NEC, which does what it says on the tin, all things cycling, if you love that. And then we've got US shows as well now. So we have a snow show in the US, and we have 2 running shows out there. So we've been busy. Considering we ran our first show in 2018, yeah, we've got a bit mad.
Yeah, full steam ahead, and it's incredible work. Well, thanks so much for sharing your thoughts today and your experiences of ultramarathons and running.
Thanks, buddy. Thanks for having me on.